More bad news.
At the moment, difficult emotions are something that we're experiencing everywhere. When you enter the church building and someone's taking your temperature, one of my friends mentioned she gets fever just due to anxiety. She's scared she'll have a fever whenever she walks in somewhere. We're constantly anxious about getting bugs. I just touched the table. I must remember to sanitize my hand again. I'm not wearing a mask. I forgot it. We're constantly anxious and self-conscious and insecure. So I would really like to talk about this, to try and explain to you a bit what effect this has on our body and what we could do to try and tolerate this better and cope better in today's times with all of this going on. So to start off with, I want to introduce everybody to someone. This is Anxiety Girl. Now listen, Anxiety Girl, it says there, able to jump to the worst conclusion in a single bound. But don't be fooled, Anxiety Girl has got her stuff together. She was the first one to order enough alcohol hand sanitizer in the beginning of lockdown to not worry about not having enough stock at home. She was the first one to know exactly which type of mask to have, where you can order it, where you get the best prices. She knew everything. By the time the schools opened again, her children were sorted. They all were comfortable wearing masks. They maybe even practiced at home. They all knew about all the hand washes, the songs to sing. Like, things are sorted. Anxiety Girl is probably the person who never arrives late at work. She leaves 15 minutes early. She prepares for in case there's a traffic jam. She always has extra sugar in the cupboard for in case visitors come and the sugar runs out. Anxiety Girl is a bit anxious in her temperament, but she's got her stuff together. Nee. But then, I want to introduce you to someone else as well. This is also Anxiety Girl. Now, this Anxiety Girl had her stuff together probably at some stage, but somewhere along the line, she lost it. This Anxiety Girl has constant physical symptoms that's really distressing. At times, she feels a heart beating here. Her chest closes up and she's having difficulty in breathing. Sometimes up to the extent where she has to go to the bathroom, remove a mask and take deep breaths. She finds that her hands become clammy and a bit like sweaty, like mine are probably now, from needing to talk in front of you guys. She finds that she sometimes has a tremor. Her tummy churns and turns like this at times. And she can't concentrate. She can't problem solve. She can't think like she usually thinks about stuff. Her tick lists are all messed up. She doesn't know when she goes to the shop. She can't remember what she's there for. And I mean, this is a girl who usually she has an Excel sheet of her monthly groceries usually to go and buy. But at the moment, the sugar is always on empty at home. The milk is never there. She just doesn't have her stuff together. So what happened? Stress, anxiety is a biological state or emotional thing we experience when circumstances get a bit challenging. Let's use the caveman as an example. The caveman sees the saber-tooth running at it and it becomes anxious. And the anxiety helps the caveman to run faster and like climb the tree faster. So we're definitely sure anxiety and stress is a necessary emotion. It's something that was created for a purpose. It's something that helped us as a human survive through our challenging times. And it's something that helped numerous other beings like animals and insects and things like that react in specific ways. So something triggers my anxiety and I have a specific reaction to survive. Otherwise, the caveman would try and tame the saber-tooth and we probably won't be here anymore. Thank goodness for anxiety. But let's look at it in a different way. So you'll remember this movie, Finding Nemo. It's my children's favorite. I can say the words with the characters by now. I know it off by heart. So for those of you who don't know it well, this is Nemo and his dad Marlin, two clownfish. And of course, the story is about Nemo. He takes all the attention, but I look at this in a different way. The true hero in this story is that little daddy clownfish Marlin. So for those of you who can't remember the story well, sometime throughout Marlin's young adult life, there was a traumatizing experience. A barracuda came and attacked him. He lost his wife, and he's an anxious little fish now. He's probably always been slightly anxious, so he's got an anxious temperament. But at the moment, he has a hard time like going out of their home. He makes Nemo have certain rituals coming in and out of the anemone, and they need to do it a few times for him to feel comfortable to go out. When he swims with his son to school, he's really anxious, and he tells him to remember this and this in a recurrent way, thinking about different things to keep you safe. When he's at school, he's really uncomfortable in front of the other parents. He tries and tells jokes to sort of soften his anxiety, and he messes up the jokes. Poor little Marlin is anxious. And luckily throughout the movie, he really struggles with anxiety, and he finds the solution for it. He finds a friend, Dory, that helps him see himself differently in the world, and maybe also see the world differently. And that helps him to rewire the way he thinks about stuff. And hopefully tonight might be the start of that rewiring process for you. And let's see what happens. So, don't get flashbacks from your grade 10 biology class. I won't make this boring. This boring picture talks about a wonderful hormonal cycle that's existing in our bodies. Now, the text is a bit small, and it's in any way big medical terms that you needn't know. But this thing is called the Hpa Axis. So this hormonal cycle is the biological principle of what happens when we have a stress reaction. So right there at the top of the brain is a part of our midbrain called the hypothalamus, or amygdala specifically, which is like the little red light that goes on in our brain to signal when something is stressful or anxiety-provoking. So, a dog comes running at you, it's a Rottweiler, it doesn't look friendly, and immediately your little red light goes on, ping, 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 yes, worry now. And it sends a message signal to another part of the brain, the Pituitary Gland, a very little gland hanging in the middle of your brain. This Pituitary Gland sends another message to your two adrenal glands. Those are two little glands like this sitting at the top of your kidneys, and they excrete these very interesting hormones called cortisol and epinephrine and nephrine. Now that's basically, it's a fancy term for adrenaline. So cortisol and adrenaline has a very specific biological reason for being there. Cortisol increases your blood pressure and increases your heart rate. So there's more blood going through to all your muscles when you're supposed to run away from the saber-tooth. There's more blood and oxygen flowing through your brain that's supposed to help you think, what should I do now to solve this very stressful situation? As well as the adrenaline, we all know adrenaline, that flight or fight reaction. It makes your heart pump fast, it gives you guts, it makes you very sharp in the moment, makes you very, very gutsy. Now this is a wonderful biological thing happening in your body when you're anxious. If we didn't have this, we'd be non-existent most likely. But now the problem comes in when this cycle is activated constantly. So on a daily basis, that little red light in your brain is saying, ping, 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 be anxious, be anxious, be anxious. Your pituitary is working hard, sending the messages through to your adrenals. Your adrenals is giving out all the cortisol and adrenaline it has. And at some stage, those glands will get tired and depleted. And increased cortisol and adrenaline on a long-standing basis inside your body has really significant medical problems. So some of the complications that occur would be, we spoke about your glucose or sugar being elevated constantly. That's diabetes. So diabetes, sugar illness as we call it, has significant medical problems. It's related to obesity, poor sleep, it's related to vascular disease, which causes strokes and heart attacks. Cortisol causes your blood pressure to constantly be elevated. We call it high blood pressure, exactly the same type of risks. Oh, and the list goes on. Sleep, metabolism is affected, your weight is affected. So obviously, having this cycle in an overdrive constantly has major medical risks. So what can we do to prevent this from happening? Or what can we do if this is already happening? How do we stop it? Because we can. And that's why we're speaking about it tonight. If it was futile, and if this was going on and it was done deal for you, we wouldn't speak tonight. But luckily, there's help available. There's stuff we can do to prevent this. So, yes, we speak about this ongoing red light going on in our brain, telling us to stress. So we're on day, I've lost count, we're close to day 150 or so of our lockdown due to our international pandemic. Whew, that's a reason to be constantly anxious, isn't it? Whoa, we all have been thinking, what's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to this loved one? They have a medical problem. How's my business going to, what's going to happen to the children? Oh, we all know this. Our cortisol and adrenaline fires have been constantly being stimulated because on a daily basis, due to the current pandemic, we've been experiencing anxiety that we didn't even know would be possible. Nobody probably thought we'd be experiencing this type of stressful situation, right? And the infection rates keep on climbing, and we're now, luckily, the curve is flattening. But Hawkeye, as lockdown goes down, the curve will go up again. Oh, this is just so much to worry about constantly. And during this lockdown, all our support systems that we usually have available, whether it's going to church or whether having the children in a good social environment at school, whether it's just being able to work, all of these support systems we have is currently sort of disabled. So, I love research. And research is one of the things that guides us as medical practitioners to treat safely and to treat properly to the best of our abilities. So luckily, when this COVID pandemic started, all the academia started looking, okay, let's try and figure this out. Let's try and get information to guide us to know who's at risk, what can we do. So they've identified certain groups of demographics or so in the community that's likely more at risk to experience mental health and specific anxiety-related problems due to the pandemic. So if you find that you're possibly on this list, or if you find that you identify loved ones in this list, don't be alarmed immediately. Just know it's great that you're here, so that you know how you can support your loved one better or how you can equip yourself better with dealing with this. So let's look at the list. So on this list of people with higher risk for mental health illness or anxiety due to COVID pandemic was females, people known with mental health illnesses, people known with medical illnesses or poor health, people who contract the illness or their loved ones, people living alone, especially in our country with our very strict lockdown, people living in urban areas. Urban areas is more like city life compared to the more rural areas. People with high amounts of social media exposure. That's a very interesting one. They've really seen that people who spend more time looking at different media things and looking at Facebook and listening to everybody's opinions definitely experience more anxiety. People with an unsteady income, and of course, where the workplace was affected by the COVID pandemic. People not taking the necessary precautionary measures. So those people traveling and visiting places where they weren't really supposed to visit yet, disrespecting the idea of wearing masks, not really obeying social distancing, they actually saw that these people had a higher risk of experiencing mental health related issues. And then, of course, something that we've really also seen is scholar or student status. So we've seen this specifically in our teenagers, high school age, and then young adulthood with university, like tertiary education. So if you identify that you're a loved one's on this list, support a bit extra if you can. Okay, and that is the real reason why I want us to talk tonight, because there's certain tools, there's certain guidelines we know about that we can teach, that we can educate you about, to utilize, to try and get this system with your ongoing red light in your brain to quiet down a bit and just take a deep breath. So tonight I'm going to discuss this, let's call it the anxiety toolbox with you, filled with wonderful tools for whatever you might need doing with your anxiety. And if you practice using these tools, you'll get better and better at it. You know, the first time I picked up a hammer and tried doing whatever I need to do with it, I wasn't that good at it. And as I practice, I'll get better and better. And these type of skills are exactly the same. The better you practice it and the more you practice it, the more easily it'll come spontaneously. And without knowing it, you'll actually be using some of these skills one day without even deliberately thinking, I must do it now. So, here are a few of the tools we'll be discussing. First up, in our toolbox, we've got our social support. And this is so simple. We can probably all think that this is important, but for some other reason, when we become mentally unwell, this is often one of the first things we avoid. When people get depressed or really anxious, they're extremely self-aware. They tend to isolate, stay more in house. When people invite them for a coffee, they say, no, I'm too busy, so I don't want to. When we're extremely anxious, we feel embarrassed to talk about it, because when we try and problem solve and talk, we talk in circles and we sound really stupid and we're embarrassed. And so one of our main tools we have to utilize when we feel unwell is something that the illness in itself causes us to avoid. It's one of the symptoms of depression, sort of decreased interest in socializing and seeing people. So if you're perhaps the support system of a loved one that you notice is possibly struggling with this, what can you do? It's really important to remember that as a friend or a loved one, when someone comes to you with a problem, or they might tell you, I'm not doing well, I'm anxious, I'm overthinking stuff, immediately we want to try and fix it. Okay, don't worry, I know just the person we can go and talk to. Perhaps we can cut down on this. Why don't we speak to your work and see if they can Hawkeye? Very often, the first thing that's necessary is not having the person who can help them problem solve, but having that sensitive, loving listener that can just validate to them. I see you. I see you having a hard time, my friend. I'm here. Tell me about it. I'm so sorry to hear this. It sounds like this has been really challenging. That validation, that confirmation that you're not alone, I'm seeing you, I'm hearing you, is often already enough to help that person gain confidence and utilize their own coping skills better. And then we can, of course, advise and guide them. And remember, there's numerous support systems. It needn't be the formal cell group or the formal helpline. It can just be people we know through church, people we know through school. It can be the neighbors. It can be family. It can be colleagues at work. Our support system is quite diverse. Next up, we have sleep. Oh, what a difficult topic. So I deliberately chose the background picture. It's a bit unclear, but it's a lady that's probably looking at social media on her phone, because that's what we all do at night. Yes, the technology is such a big problem for our sleep hygiene, we call it, our sleep habits. So sleep is so important. Most adults need at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep on average to stay healthy. 7 to 9 hours sleep. Wow, if I could only do that every night. There's a few selected people, very few selected people who can actually cope on 5 to 6 hours. I constantly try and tell myself I'm one of them, and I constantly fall flat on my nose after I've tried it for 3 or 4 nights, maybe working on a PowerPoint presentation for a talk, and then I don't cope. So I know, and I've learned this the hard way, and I still keep on learning, I need more sleep than 6 hours a night. If we're sleep deprived, what happens? Sleep deprivation has been shown to increase your risk for, hold on to your hats, it's a long list. Memory difficulty, concentration difficulty, increased risk for accidents, increased risk for injuries, increased risk for diabetes, increased risk for heart disease, increased risk for high blood pressure, increased risk for mental health illnesses, increased risk for relationship difficulties, increased risk for problem-solving difficulties, and the list goes on. I'm just mentioning a few. There's a risk for obesity if you have sleep deprivation. That usually makes the patients very quickly, okay, no, wait, if I can lose weight by sleeping better, I'll sleep better. That usually works. And it's been shown in research. Now, what are the things that we could do to make sure that we sleep better? Of course, the environment in which we sleep is really important. So a dark, quiet space, your room should be a calming place, and your bed should be mainly for sleeping. It's not good for students, for instance, to sit and study on the bed. It's not healthy. We shouldn't teach our brain that we do stuff that requires being awake for long on our beds. So they always joke and they say, so the bed is actually for sex and sleep. So the environment where we sleep is important. So it's important to go and maybe tonight when you walk into your bedroom, have a look around, make sure the light is dimmed, make some changes if necessary. Buy a softer blanket if you don't like your blanket. You know, just go and make a few changes to make this environment a bit warmer, a bit fuzzier, a bit more pro-sleep. It's also really good to have a routine. And this is probably one of the most important things with sleep also. Teaching your brain. You usually go to bed round about 10 o'clock and you usually wake up round about 6 o'clock. That's sort of my routine. Train your brain. Sleep training for babies, remember that? We're adults, but we also need sleep training. You got to train your brain because your brain remembers that. So at times, this beautiful biological cycle that happens at night with sleeping starts occurring spontaneously if your brain knows around about 10 o'clock it's supposed to sort of quiet down, slow the brain waves and get sleepy. So if you train your brain doing that better by sticking to a specific routine, it's really helpful. Avoid things that disrupt sleep, overuse of alcohol, overuse of stimulating things like nicotine and caffeine. Trying to stay as healthy as possible regarding diet is also good. A normal balanced diet, nothing extreme, just normal balanced diet. Your evening meal, not too big and not too late. And then one of the things that many people don't realize is that it's been shown that regular cardiac exercise improves your sleep. It improves the quality of sleep. So the few hours that you do get to sleep, you'll go into a deeper sleep quicker. And when you wake up the next morning, you'll feel more refreshed. And of course, the exercise has all the other medical benefits that we always tell you about. So that is sleep. Now, one big problem with sleep is, of course, we said, the cell phone. And it's been shown also that directly, if you count the numbers of screens around you when you sleep, it's directly associated with worse sleep. It's been shown. The light from our cell phones and computers and the TV screen activates your brain waves. And people will tell me, but I sleep so lekker in front of the TV. You don't. Because if you wake up there, you're groggy, aren't you? It's the truth, ne? We don't sleep well in front of the TV. We fall asleep, and you know what? Your brain is constantly thinking, oh, this is not lekker. It's in these awake really busy brain waves, whether it's the light of the TV, the noise that you still hear, or just the fact that the screen still activated your brain waves before falling asleep. So screens really disrupt our sleep. So the advice is to try and avoid screens at least an hour to 2 before we go to bed. And what's the thing we're all doing just before you close your eyes? We pick up our cell phone and put on our alarm clock on the screen. So it's just so difficult to adapt to not using screens. Some of the cell phones has technology now where it shuts off the slightly more activating light waves, which is really nice. But really try and avoid screens as much as you can close to bedtime. And of course, at night when we wake up and you realize it's 3 o'clock, how did you realize? You picked up your cell phone again, activated your brain waves, and now I can't fall asleep. It's a difficult thing, but we can just try and adapt to it a little bit by avoiding the screens. Okay, next up is exercise. Exercise. So, I don't know if you guys know, but exercise is one of the 3 treatments that's on international guidelines for mild to moderate depression as treatment. So by this, I try to say, if you have mild to moderate depression, if you do specific type of exercise alone, it could actually treat your depression. Whom of you knew that? This was mind-blowing to me. And this has helped so many patients who didn't tolerate medication well, couldn't afford seeing the therapist regularly, etc. So it's been shown in research, mild to moderate depression can be treated by cardiac exercise, but it should be at least 3 times a week, at least round about 40 minutes long. And if you can, do your exercise in a slightly social manner, with someone or with a trainer, it's actually more beneficial. But how cool is that? Nee? So, if we don't just have mild to moderate depression, it's probably not going to do the trick as a standalone. But I always advise this. I always have the little speech about exercise with the patient when I see them with depression, because it's really a good strategy to strengthen the treatment if you now need tablets or need therapy, etc. There's also some types of other exercise like yoga, Pilates type of exercises that of course has a lot of anxiety benefits as well, but not as much for depression. Cardiac exercise also helps for anxiety. And I'll teach you now something about depression and anxiety. The 2 walk together, but we'll get to that now. So exercise is really important, so if you can do it, try it. And of course, we know it's going to improve our sleep, so it's great. Now, next up is relaxation and mindfulness. Relaxation and mindfulness is actually a skill. It's a technique that you acquire. Psychologists teach it. They practice it with you. And we're lucky enough with today's technology to have it available on the internet. We have things which is called internet CBT, where it's a type of therapy you can do with yourself with some guidance through exercises on the internet and so on. But to come back to relaxation and mindfulness, it's a very diverse topic this. People will come and tell me, but I don't like mindfulness. And then I say, what did you do? They told me to mindfully breathe. And it's not just that. Mindfulness is so diverse. I promise you there's some or other exercise in mindfulness that you would like. You will. So let's talk a bit about it so that you have a better understanding. A few examples is things like breathing exercises, mindfulness breathing exercises. That means not just take 3 breaths. It's mindfully doing an exercise where you probably close your eyes for 2 minutes or 3 minutes at least, and focus on your breathing, feel your breathing, and practice this. Things like progressive muscle relaxation exercises, stretch exercises. Hobbies can be done mindfully. Let's think about examples. Painting, building puzzles, and just focusing on what you're doing and staying in that moment. And as you realize your mind is getting distracted, bring yourself back. Gardening is such a wonderful example. I love gardening. personally for myself, I find it so relaxing. There's a whole movement about gardening in America. I can't remember what they call the therapy, but it's got to do with mindful gardening, where they've shown in research that it's relaxing and helpful. Other things would be creativity, and that's more, that gets to anything. Anything that you can creatively do and be mindful of what you're doing, whether it's writing, painting, drawing, doing mosaic tiles, whatever it be. That type of creativity is often a mindfulness activity that you're practicing without you knowing it. Baking, cooking, that's all examples. So it's so diverse. You just need to know what would suit your personality and likes. And then I want to talk about online apps. Mindfulness and relaxation exercises is a hard skill to start practicing by yourself. So there's numerous apps. Some of them are cheap, some of them are expensive, some of them are good, some of them not so good. But there's so many available that helps you to practice this type of exercise. And one thing to know about relaxation and mindfulness exercises is it's almost like training for a marathon. You need to get fit with it. So the more you practice it, the better you'll get at it. When you meditate, you'll be able to concentrate longer and longer. When you build puzzles, you'll find that you're able to do it longer and longer before you get tired. So it's often helpful to have some guideline with which you can use. And that's why I inserted this slide. This app, since COVID have started, this has helped numerous of my patients. It's even helped me. This app is a free application that's available on both the Apple Store, Google Play Store. And in the beginning of COVID pandemic, a group of psychologists, I think from America, made this app available. And I have not found another app that was as good as this one for me. And it's free. So if you open this app, you'll find, you don't read the text one on the left, but it says managing stress. There's certain challenges you can do, and there's certain tools you can go and open. And it's got numerous nice contents, like a guided relaxation muscle exercise, a guided breathing exercise. It's got nice quotes. It's got mood checking type of tools you can use. It's wonderful. I'd really invite you, if you want to take something regarding mindfulness and relaxation home, go and open this app and have a look at it. And you'll find that it's really helpful. And it's free. So I really think these people changed a lot during the COVID time for me when I was able to advise this to my patients for free. Then, I'd really like to ask, what does the Bible tell me about anxiety? What can I do with anxiety that I know God is behind it and giving a thumbs up? And this part of Philippians that I'll be reading to you is very special to me because a very close family member of mine really struggled with anxiety. And when I counseled her and I said, listen, I'm doing this talk on anxiety. Can you help me with something concrete from the Bible? What is the best thing that you've read that helped you with your process? And she immediately gave me this verse. And listen how beautiful this is. Don't fret or worry. Instead of worrying, pray. Let petitions and praises shape your worries into prayers, letting God know your concerns. Before you know it, a sense of God's wholeness, everything coming together for good, will come and settle you down. It's wonderful what happens when Christ displaces worry at the center of your life. Summing it up all, friends, I'd say you'll do best by filling your minds and meditating on things true, noble, reputable, authentic, compelling and gracious. The best, not the worst. The beautiful, not the ugly. Things to praise, not to curse. Put into practice what you have learned from me, what you heard and saw and realized. Do that, and God, who makes everything work together, will work you into His most excellent harmonies. Wow, what a promise. What a promise. And this verse really helped me in just feeling so much more supported and backed in some of the techniques and treatment advice I give to my patients. That Cbt therapy that I spoke of a bit earlier, it's called cognitive behavioral therapy. And that's a type of therapy psychologists do and practice with you, especially if you have anxiety disorders or depression. So they literally go and identify with you what's your bad thinking habits. And they try and change that with you. And it takes a lot of exercise. It takes a bit of time as well. But they literally rewire some of your thinking patterns. And if you go look at fancy scans they've done before and after receiving this type of therapy for a while, it's actually been shown that there's new nerve pathways growing in your brain. How excited is that? So the brain is one of the organs that's actually able to grow new pathways, acquire new skills, adapt to necessary change. And they spoke about it in the Bible. Listen to this. Reputable, authentic, compelling, and gracious thoughts. The best, not the worst. The beautiful, not the ugly. Things to praise, not things to curse. This is sort of one of the techniques in the type of therapy we advise. And the Bible speaks about it. Yes. That really helped me to feel so comfortable with the treatment advice I give to my patients. I've got his backing. So now we know what the Bible says. And this slide, unfortunately, didn't come out that clear, and you don't need to see the small text. What I want you to see is, it talks about what do I want to be during COVID-19. And the important thing just to notice on the slides is the 3 different zones, or nearly phases that you could go through. The first one being the fear zone. And I'll read you some of the smaller text. It says, I engage in panic buying. Whom of you did that with all the toilet paper? I get irritated easily. I'm keyed up. I'm on the edge. I burst out very easily. I don't tolerate stress well. I hoard toilet paper, food, and medicines I do not need. And I'll be honest, I did hoard some stuff. I was there too. I'm not perfect, definitely not. And then the next zone comes, and they talk about the learning zone. So the thoughts going on around that would be, I begin to let go of the things I can't control. Okay. I stop consuming things that take my inner peace away, from food to news. There's numerous things. I recognize that everybody is doing their best, and they can, under complicated circumstances, only do this. And then there's this outer zone. And I was so inspired when I read this. The outer zone is called the growth zone. And the growth zone says, okay, I find a purpose. I think of others and look for ways to help them. I'm grateful. I live in the present moment. Oh, and I was so pleased when I walked in tonight. I had some wonderful conversations with some of the people here already that said, oh, from the lockdown, the church has done this, and we've learned this, and this person acquired new skills and adapted. Oh, I became so excited. So I hope everybody might receive a bit of inspiration tonight to take that step into the growth zone and say, yes, okay, I'm going to try my best. And at times, it's an ebb and flow. We might take a step back, but one step back, 2 forward, hey? We got to keep on inspiring ourselves to move forward and grow from this. Then on the next slide, I think it's important to say that sometimes anxiety is really not normal anymore. That's why my job is important. So when is it not normal anymore? When should I be seeking help? Now, first of all, if you tonight identified, I'm anxious, and you go and practice these sort of skills we spoke about in the anxiety toolbox, and you still don't feel better after really trying your best, I think it's necessary to look at the next few slides. Signs of anxiety disorders is something I want to discuss with you. But before I tell you the signs, I want to tell you anxiety disorders is a group of illnesses. There's numerous. There's one called generalized anxiety disorder. There's one called specific phobias. There's panic disorder, and there's a few of them. Now, I don't want you to get overly concerned now. These type of illnesses are often not recognized correctly, and people don't even know they have it. But listen to the signs. So signs of having an anxiety disorder is excessive and persistent worrying about numerous things. So stuff that your friend next to you really won't fret about. You can't help it. Numerous things, whether it's at work, whether it's at home, whether it's at the church, whether it's in a social gathering. I'm excessively worrying about this stuff. And often, very important, when you remove that trigger that made you anxious, you're still anxious. It's still there. So it doesn't necessarily always leave. Panic attacks. Panic attacks is 10 or 15 minutes of experiencing extreme, overwhelming anxiety, which is all those symptoms we said the second anxiety girl experienced, from heart beating fast, chest feeling closed up and choking. Some people think they have a heart attack, tremor, shaking, and sweaty palms, sometimes feeling cold and dizzy, not being able to concentrate well. And after 10 minutes or so, it suddenly leaves your body and you're like, feeling really tired. And often these panic attacks aren't even triggered by anything. So you'll be sitting, having a coffee or watching TV, and it starts. Easily being tired. Being constantly anxious is really tiring. So usually people who have anxiety disorders, by close in the afternoon, 4, 5, they're extremely moeg. Hulle wil net lê. We're really tired by then. And it's because of this adrenaline overdrive that depletes our energy-providing hormones. These people have sleep difficulty. Some sleep too much, some can't sleep. Concentration difficulty, being irritable and keyed up, easily acting out. Experiencing muscle tension. Oh, these muscles, hierdie. Oh. And clenching of the teeth. Nee. Now on the next one, there's even more symptoms. But I've put a picture of a chameleon there for a reason. Now this little chameleon, his name is depression. Depression is such an interesting thing. It looks different depending on whom it's sitting. So one person having depression might feel extremely tired. She just wants to sleep the whole time. She doesn't want to interact. She moves slowly. She can't concentrate or focus. And she's just not well. The next person being anxious is a guy who comes in and telling me, yes, I've tried everything. I've got my tick list. I'm doing more than I usually do. I'm trying to socialize even more to get on top of things. I'm working harder to cope with my income that's less. I'm really trying everything, but nothing is enjoyable anymore. I just can't get satisfaction from anything I'm doing, so I can't fall asleep at night. We call both of this depression, but it looks so different. So depending on whom it's sitting, depending on what your personality and coping skills and life is like, it changes character and color completely. And therefore, you actually need a doctor to diagnose it. It's better that a professional diagnoses it with you. So, some of the examples of depression would be loss of interest and having difficulty enjoying things that usually interested you, or hobbies, and not just finding pleasure from it anymore. An increase or decrease partaking in hobbies and certain activities, like this guy I gave as an example. Some people really overdo certain things to try and get a handle on things when they feel they're losing control. Feeling constantly sad and hopeless. Just feeling that there's no tomorrow that I want to experience. Even feeling irritable. So depression isn't just feeling down and tearful. It's being sometimes kwaai and keyed up and just I'm constantly not nice to the children. I don't tolerate it when the sounds in the workplace is loud. I'm feeling constantly on the edge. It could be depression. and urges to self-harm, and then, of course, substance use also, like alcohol usage or other drugs. All of these things might be symptoms of depression. And getting to know this little chameleon, anxiety in itself could also be depression rather than a legitimate anxiety disorder. And therefore, the treatment might just slightly be different depending on what your diagnosis is. Now, the treatment, let's talk about anxiety first. The treatment usually is quite holistic. Unfortunately, there's many people who just focus on the medication, and then there's people that's really anti-medication. But an holistic approach, especially with anxiety disorders, is important. So yes, there's a biological problem. Your Hpa Axis, that horrible biology slide, is in overdrive. We need to just get this system a bit slowed. So we often use medication. But there's different medications. And your treatment plan in terms of your medication is tailor-made according to your body's needs. So every person's medication we'd advise isn't the same. So the tannies in the old days would say, "Ooh, this pill is definitely the best. It helped me a lot. It might not be the best pill for you." Okay. So if someone says, "My hierdie pink pilletjie, this one has been constantly, this has been my lifesaver," or "Just don't take the blue tablet from the doctor, it made me really sick." The tablets differ so much, and each person's body metabolizes and handles the tablets differently. And therefore, it's necessary to sort of walk a path with your health practitioner to decide what's best for you and to try different things. But usually, there's short-term treatment you use, which is the addictive sedative medication. But there's definitely a place for it, short-term. It's possibly, I think, one of my worst nightmares in my practice to try and help patients who's been on this type of medication for so long that their bodies are totally dependent on it. And what a challenge to get them off this medication. So always ask your doctor, is this tablet addictive? Because they're supposed to be telling you yes, so that you know. So that is a short-term treatment, but while we do that, we start other treatments like serotonin increasing antidepressants. So yes, we're talking about anxiety treatment, and I just said we use an antidepressant. That's right. Specific antidepressants, the serotonin increasing ones, and usually at specific dosages, often a bit higher than for depression. Now you don't need to know these details, but I think talking about it, I'd like to share the knowledge with you so that you know. Then, away from the medical treatment, there's therapy we use. Okay, so we did the tablets. Now there's therapy. And in therapy, we do those clever things like practice those relaxation exercises we spoke about, acquiring skills to use when you're feeling anxious or overwhelmed, etc. And then there's certain other techniques like the cognitive behavioral therapy, which was that rewiring of your bad thinking habits we spoke about. But it doesn't just end there. We've already spoken about exercise, sleep, and other things in your lifestyle that could be adjusted that also helps with your treatment. And it's worthwhile looking into all of this. Then I thought to put in the next slide, especially just because I really think often finding out you might be suffering of a mental illness is quite traumatizing. There might be someone here tonight thinking, "Oh, God." And it could be very distressing. And I want to tell you that there's hope at the end of the tunnel. And I took this graph that we looked at now with what do I want to be in COVID-19, and I thought to myself, I want to adjust this and I say, who do I want to be if I have been affected by mental illness? And the exact same principles came to mind. There's a fear zone. I engage in my panic reactions. I get irritated easily, and I have bad coping skills. In COVID, it was the hoarding of certain things. But in depression, it's usually I isolate myself, I use my substances to avoid and sort of just get away. And then there's the next episode, or the next zone or phase, which is the learning phase, where we often learn about ourselves, learn what bad coping skills we've acquired, what bad thinking patterns we acquired. We understand and identify emotions better. We often also learn how to disclose that we've got this illness, which is a major thing for many people. We really don't want to usually tell people if we've got a mental illness. We've got this inherent stigma idea that when you have mental illness, you're weak. We don't say that about the guy who gets high blood pressure and needs to start taking tablets, do we? No. So why on earth are we telling people with mental illness it's because they're weak or they're broken? It's exactly the same. It's a biologically driven illness. So we treat it as a scientific thing. We treat specific hormones in the body and correct it. And then there's this growth zone. And I enlarged the text there. So I have a mental illness. I've been affected by it. I'm getting treatment. How do I want to wake up the next day and take my first step? Find purpose. Spread hope. Help others. Find things to be grateful for and continue practicing my new skills to stay healthy. That would be my hope for every single person that's ever been affected by a mental illness. And I really hope that would be the end result of treatment for patients when they go for help. I'm going to end off by just putting the slide on because I know everybody's struggling. On this slide, there's two different helplines. There's a SADAK helpline, which is a suicide helpline that's 24 hours a day, freely available. AKESO has a helpline. And if you realize today you or a loved one needs help, I would really like to motivate you to start by visiting the general practitioner, the doctor, because they are actually very well equipped at treating depression and anxiety. And anxiety can be treated very successfully. Clinical psychologists are also a big cornerstone of our treatment. So by starting with a clinical psychologist is also a good idea. And lastly, if help is still not successful or difficult to acquire, one could even go to the specialist, the psychiatrist. But I really think we've got wonderful general practitioners in town. And I really hope that you'll be able to find the necessary help. And that's the end of my talk. And I hope I didn't scare you. I hope I was able to inspire you to know how to deal better with these difficult things. So thank you for listening. I appreciate it.